welcome to Spiii Radio with your host, Guru Nostra. The following information presented is the opinion of the speakers, but not necessarily the opinion of the TerraJet network. All information provided is gained from open source and available on the internet. Caveat emptor 347-324-3287, 347-324-3287.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, madame and messieurs, boys and girls, mes enfants. Welcome to another edition. I am your host, Colin Knight, a.k.a. Guru Nostra. It's great to be here. Lots to get to tonight, so fill up your glasses, find your favorite seat, crank up the volume, and we'll be right back.
Of all the objectives we seek, first and foremost is the establishment of lasting world peace. We know only too well that war comes not when the forces of freedom are strong. It is when they are weak that tyrants are tempted.
Not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Ladies and gentlemen, the purveyor of political pontification.
And good evening, everybody. Glad you could make it tonight. It is Thursday, August the 28th, 2014, 7 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Mountain, 10 p.m. East Coast, 4 a.m. London, England, and of course 5 a.m. in Israel and Gaza. It is currently 12 degrees Celsius in the cold city of Calgary. That's around 54, 53 degrees Fahrenheit for our imperial friends. Our ongoing report of issues from around the world will be reviewing news and events which perpetuates the erosion of freedom, and we hope you will choose to participate and engage in the conversation, either by phone, if you're listening live, 347-324-3287, and if you're picking up the show via archive, you can still comment on the show, vocr2012 at gmail.com. Remember, when calling in, we only request your first name and your geographical location. Other than that, you shall remain anonymous. Special personal thanks to all who have made contact and offered their support for what we do. Without the Spiii audience and operatives and readers and the private link information you supply, we would not be able to bring you our weekly overview of world events in such a qualified format as we do. Spiii Radio broadcasts worldwide on the Blog Talk Radio service, and archive repeats on a number of repeater services, including YouTube archives and a VOCR radio. We transmit throughout North America, Europe, and beyond. We remind you that our daily Spiii Gazette provides news and views which mainstream media refuses to or cannot report. Links and stories from around the world, and we do invite you to check it out. Spiii Gazette, one word, that's SPII Gazette.blogspot.com. A couple of special shout-outs tonight, as we do every week. Special shout-out to the Scottish lass. They're camping in the rain this week, communing with nature. And pleased that you get to rest and sleep well while camping. It seems to be the best sleep that you do get. Downtime is very important, and you do, of course, deserve as many rewards as possible. Pete in Chicago, we appreciate your street smarts info, Pete, and we appreciate your localized truth of corruption in Chicago. And we look forward to further inputs, and we will be doing a piece on that in a couple of weeks. To Phoebe, Buddy, and their parents, our Calgary family, put another log on that darn fire, Todd. Forget about pulling up the weeds in the trees. Just stay warm. But wherever you are, Todd, for the love of God, wear gloves. And, of course, keep those comments on local issues and politics coming. We do love those Facebook postings. And last but certainly not least, to the Southeast Bricky's much better half. Hairstyle change, Beth? Really? Phone lines are open for the duration of the show tonight. We hope you will participate. We hope you engage in the discussion or the conversation, either by phone, if you are listening live, 347-324-3287, or come to the virtual tech studio on the TerraChat Blog Talk radio page. That's TerraChat.net on Blog Talk. And if you are picking up the show via archive, we do remind you, your voices can be heard. VOCR2012 drop us an email. Let us know what you think. So let's set up the board. Let's give you a couple of minutes to get everything set up on your end. Make sure you have your refreshments. Set up your speed dial on your phone or on Skype. Smoke them if you got them. We will be right back.
Mr. Speaker, I thought nothing this president could ever say or do would surprise me anymore. But this flushed and breathless rush to embrace terrorists launching rockets at Israeli children is an unprecedented act of cowardice and betrayal.
Susan Rice was prepped to say the so-called protests were rooted in an internet video so as not to show a broader failure of policy. Now, we've impeached a president for lying about sex with an intern. A president has resigned in the face of certain impeachment for covering up a burglary. Why wouldn't we impeach this president for not protecting and defending Americans in the bloodbath known as Benghazi?
Josh, you've had Attorney General Eric Holder came out and he said that the inflow of Westerners into the civil war in Syria is, quote, the most frightening thing, more frightening than anything I have seen as Attorney General. You had the foreign policy experts in the Wall Street Journal talk about how this is instability not seen since the 1970s. Basically an all-out war, what's looking like an all-out war in Israel and the Palestinian territories. You see the situation with terrorist group taking over vast territory in Iraq and in Syria. You see Russian aggression in Ukraine. You see concerns about Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. It doesn't seem like a time to be touting tranquility on the international scene. I mean, do you think the president's foreign policy bears any responsibility for any of this, or there's anything that he can do about any of this?
347-324-3287, 347-324-3287.
And for the last 7 weeks or so, we have opened the show with the Hamas-Israel conflict. And I have to tell you that our emails were flooded with updates and stories which basically consumed our team's ability to report the rest of the news from other areas of the world. Well, now Israel and Hamas have a tentative peace deal, at least until Hamas managed to rebuild some tunnels and restock their missile supply from Iran and Qatar and elsewhere. So we've turned our attention to other hotspots tonight, such as Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, the Ukraine, while of course keeping an eye on North Korea, China, and Europe, and carefully paying attention to North American domestic issues, such as the illegal aliens coming in from Mexico into Texas and the likes, and of course the fallout from the Ferguson riots. The world most certainly does not seem safer than before Obama came as president. Irregardless of what Democrats claim, the West is in serious trouble, and the fight is definitely coming to North America and Europe sooner or later. It is time to prepare. It is time to convince the Obama administration that they're on the wrong path for peace. It is time to either wake up President Obama or remove him from office to protect what is left of a once great nation called the United States of America. It was once the most powerful military force in history, the defender of Western values, and a peaceful life for North American citizens. Today, President Obama held one of his famous press conferences, comes out to the dais in his nice tanned summer suit as he gets ready to do a couple of events tomorrow to raise some more money for the DNC as they get ready to fight the battle in 2016. So Obama will be going to a couple of fundraisers tomorrow instead of hunkering down in the Situation Room trying to figure out what to do about ISIS. And when asked about ISIS in Syria, Obama gave a shocking answer. It's an answer that's going to echo around the world, and it's going to embolden our enemies. Now, this isn't much of an answer, not much of a soundbite, but this is what Obama said when asked, what kind of strategy can we expect regarding ISIS?
We don't have a strategy yet.
We don't have a strategy yet. We don't know. We don't know what to do with them. I mean, honestly, can you believe the President of the United States, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, one of the greatest militaries on earth, don't have a strategy? ISIS and their leaders must be jumping up and down in excitement that they have confused and terrified the military and the presidency of the United States of America. Now, given that, I will have to say this, that I do tend to agree with a number of presenters that are not normally on the Obama side when they say that why is it the United States that must carry the freight on dealing with ISIS? Why is it the neighbors around Iraq and Syria have kept quiet? Why is it that they don't put their sons and daughters on the battlefield? Why is it they do not carry the political, the social, and the financial freight to get rid of this cancer that was in their body, known as the Middle East? It's a question that needs to be answered. They are filthy rich with oil money, billions and billions of dollars spent on the fancy cars and beautiful palaces and very attractive clothes. They have penthouses and executive suites all over the world to constantly vacation and spend nothing of spending $100,000, $200,000 on shopping sprees in the most elegant places on earth. And yet they are silent and they offer no military assistance whatsoever on dealing with the cancer that's raging within their own belly. It's a question worth thinking about. Maybe Obama is hoping to get some kind of a local coalition together. In fact, he's sending our pal John Kerry back into the Middle East. God, I hope John Kerry's wearing Kevlar. Did I say that out loud? John Kerry is not exactly wanted. He has been a very ineffective negotiator in the Middle East to date. And he ran from the Middle East with a tail between his legs and went to Asia in hopes to regain and curry some favor for his failing job as Secretary of State. He's probably following along Hillary Clinton's guidelines of run around the world and do nothing. Well, the cost of food and transport in North America continues to climb. Unemployment in the U.S. remains at 1.9 million and climbing. The welfare rolls and food stamp subsidies remains out of this earth and doesn't look like it's going to ease anytime soon. The Fed maintains their artificial bubble of a stable economy by injecting $80 billion monthly into the U.S. economy. Money that the U.S. government don't have, creating the currency from hot presses reminiscent of Germany at the end of World War II. Government market and GDP numbers continue to be massaged and manipulated to show positive results, probably to curry favor with moneylenders and stock markets around the world. But European banking appear to have announced that they're growing a little weary of the U.S. artificial economy. Yes, Virginia, the bubble is about to burst. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when it does, kiss away all of those nice, fat, plump union pensions, kiss away all those federal entitlements when you retire from the federal government. Now, it seems to me that the Obama administration appears to be hell-bent on removing the U.S. military from a standing of world power. They appear to be attempting to degrade the three branches of service, and they say little or nothing about the vets who have already died or been maimed in the number of wars that have led up to today. Don't seem to have any qualms about breaching long-standing agreements with former allies around the world. Now, curiously enough, last week, the Joint Chiefs of Staff were adamant that firepower was required in Syria and Iraq. And now they've changed their mind. So what strategy do you have, Mr. Obama?
We don't have a strategy yet.
We don't have a strategy yet.
The situation in Iraq has improved. Violence has been reduced substantially from the horrific sectarian killing of 2006 and 2007. Al-Qaeda in Iraq has been dealt a serious blow by our troops and Iraq's security forces, and through our partnership with Sunni Arabs.
Last night, like millions of my fellow Americans, I listened intently to the President of the United States lay out his new strategy for Iraq. We all hoped and prayed the President would present us with a plan that would make things better. Instead, I fear that what the President has proposed is more likely to make things worse.
You give me this office, and in turn, my fears, doubts, insecurities, foibles, need for sleep, family life, vacations, leisure is gone. I am giving myself to you, and the American people should have no patience for whatever's going through your head because you've got a job to do.
Attorney General Eric Holder came out and he said that the inflow of Westerners into the civil war in Syria is, quote, the most frightening thing, more frightening than anything I have seen as Attorney General. You had the foreign policy experts in the Wall Street Journal talk about how this is instability not seen since the 1970s. Partisan foreign policy experts. I think that you see a wide range of people looking at basically an all-out war, what's looking like an all-out war in Israel and the Palestinian territories. You see the situation with the terrorist group taking over vast territory in Iraq and in Syria. You see Russian aggression in Ukraine. You see concerns about Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. It doesn't seem like a time to be touting tranquility on the international scene. I mean, do you think the President's foreign policy bears any responsibility for any of this, or there's anything that he can do about it?
347-324-3287, 347-324-3287.
So last week, as I was saying, the Joint Chiefs of Staff were adamant that firepower was required in Syria and Iraq to stop ISIL. And a few days later, they recanted their statements and falling in line with the new Obama doctrine of do nothing or as little as possible, resulting in many to believe that the Obama administration could actually be aiding ISIS in their desire for some kind of an Islamic state. Now, of course, this is renewing calls from the conservative right for impeachment. During this debacle, Obama authorized an arms sale of billions of dollars to the tiny state of Qatar, who are known to be financial supporters of Hamas, again creating tensions with stalwart allies such as Israel. Now, regardless of what your opinion is of Israel and the fight in Gaza, you do not stab an ally in the back. That's dangerous, especially an ally that is the only democracy in the area that could possibly change the outcome of ISIS and ISL. The only democracy in the area that has kept Iran in check somewhat, because we most certainly have not, by going into meeting after meeting to try and hold off Iran from getting nuclear weapons. And each time we go into the meeting, we give up something else, and Iran give up nothing. We have systematically, over the last 6 years, had meetings with Iran regarding their nuclear possibilities, and we've continued to allow them time and time again to negotiate their way out of a problem and make the West surrender an issue so that they move forward. It's a very confusing time why we have not dealt with Iran. We didn't deal with ISIS before they began their expansion into Iraq. And we are financing and paying for military weaponry into a tiny nation of Qatar so they may proliferate American-made weapons, some of the finest weapons in the world, into the Middle East. A new English-language Al-Qaeda magazine features a how-to article on making car bombs and suggests terror targets in the United States, including casinos in Vegas, oil tankers, military colleges, and implies that there will be attacks on the North American soil and that they're imminent. The online publication, which is called Palestine Betrayal of the Guilty Conscience Al-Malaham, and put out by the media arm of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, it's known as AQAP, AQAP for short, calls for Muslims around the world to follow the recipe provided to set off car bombs in crowded venues. It includes a timeline of a selected jihad operation that the Middle East Media Research Institute has flagged this slickly produced latest edition.
I recommended to the President, and the President has authorized me to go ahead and send about 130 new assessment team members up to northern Iraq in the Erbil area to take a closer look and give a more in-depth assessment of where we can continue to help the Iraqis with what they're doing and the threats that they are now dealing with.
This so-called Commission of Inquiry established by the UN Human Rights Council is a travesty. It has about as much credibility as a kangaroo court. And its chairman, well, he has such a documented record of anti-Israel bias, I think any fair-minded person would demand that he recuse himself.
For the first time in 9 years, there are no Americans fighting in Iraq. 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq. We did. 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq. I did. Now, 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq, and I did. I told you we'd end the war in Iraq. We did. I said we'd end the Iraq war. We did. I told you I'd end the war in Iraq, and we did. I ended the war in Iraq as I promised. In 2008, I promised we'd end the war in Iraq. We've ended it. I was able to keep my promise and end the war in Iraq. 2008, I promised we would end the war in Iraq, and we've ended it. The war in Iraq is over. The war in Iraq is over from ending the war in Iraq. That's why I ended the war in Iraq. The first time in 9 years, there are no Americans fighting in Iraq.
Do you have any second thoughts about pulling all ground troops out of Iraq?
You know what I just find interesting is the degree to which this issue keeps on coming up, as if this was my decision.
347-324-3287, 347-324-3287.
It appears it's going to be one of those evenings where we're jumping in and out of live broadcasts. Blog Talk is either on the fritz or Skype is on the fritz, but we'll keep plugging away for the next 35 minutes. So anyway, this magazine, online magazine, suggests lists of targets for lone wolves or individually executed terror attacks, including New York City, Times Square, casinos, nightclubs in Vegas, oil tankers, trains, the Georgia Military College, the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and General Atomics Defense Contractor in San Diego. Now, this magazine literally shows you how to make bombs and gives you shopping lists for domestic chemicals and cooking gas and oxygen gas and barometers and it goes on and on and on. And then they list targets in Britain, and they call for targeting of tourist resorts frequented by Israeli, Britons, and Americans. It's a 9-spread article, how to make a bomb in the kitchen of your mom. I mean, this stuff just goes on and on and on. And this is wide open on the internet. And it's scary stuff. Very scary stuff. So as I said at the beginning of the broadcast, it's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when. If we don't deal with this issue very quickly, there's trouble in River City, ladies and gentlemen. And the President of the United States today, when asked what's the strategy for ISIS, replied very quickly.
We don't have a strategy yet.
We don't have a strategy yet. Well, this isn't his first rodeo. It isn't the United States' first rodeo. So what are you going to do? What are we going to do? A top UN aid official says the Islamic State group is taking violence against civilians in Syria to a new level and is threatening the cross-border humanitarian aid operations recently approved by the Security Council. The threat comes as UN humanitarian aid officials report the first bit of improvement on getting aid to hard-to-reach people in Syria. More than 190,000 people have been slaughtered in the conflict, and almost 1 in 2 Syrians is either internally displaced or a refugee. So what are we going to do, Mr. President? What does the Obama administration decide to do about ISIS in Syria and Iraq?
We don't have a strategy yet.
We don't have a strategy yet. The Islamic State group killed more than 150 troops captured in a recent fighting for a string of military bases in northeast Syria, shooting some of them and slashing the throats of others with knives, and in the past 24 hours in the latest mass killings attributed to extremists. The southern Syria, meanwhile, gunmen have detained 43 UN peacekeepers during fighting on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. It added another 81 peacekeepers were trapped in the area by the heavy clashes between rebels and Syrian troops. UN forces trapped. And what is the UN going to do about it? Well, Barack Obama's answer to everything is, well, we're going to put some sanctions here, we're going to throw some sanctions there, and we might as well throw a couple of $1 billion worth of arms into Qatar and see what they're going to do about it. The killing of government troops combined with photos of dusty, terrified conscripts and a militant guard in the desert underscored how the extremist groups use violence and images of violence to instill fear in its opponents as it seeks to expand the pro-state it has carved out in Syria and neighboring Iraq. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said that many of the soldiers killed were rounded up Wednesday in the arid countryside near the recently captured airfield. 3 days after Islamic State fighters seized the base, the government troops were among a large group of soldiers from the base who were stuck behind the front lines after the airfield fell to jihadi forces. All this happening while Obama recovered from his vacation and continued to threaten immigration reform by executive order to bypass Congress's approval. Millions of illegal immigrants, many of them criminal elements, already housed around the country. MS-13 members who have wasted no time in establishing gangs and mule trails for murder, thugs, prostitution, and other illegal actions, almost immune from the local law authorities. As we go to air tonight, Ukraine are reporting that they've seen Russia flexing its muscle. 2 columns of Russian tanks have reportedly entered the Ukraine, adding to a security spokesman forcing border guards to retreat amid fears that rebels are seeking to create a land link between Russia and the Crimea. Ukrainian Security Council spokesman Colonel Lysenko says Ukrainian forces were fired at using Grad missile systems from Russian territory. Lysenko said about an hour and a half later, 2 columns, including tanks and other fighting vehicles, began an attack on the border posts. They later entered Ukraine from Veselo-Vonsenenyak and Maximovo and the Rostov region of Russia. Of course, the Ukrainian border guards retreated because they didn't have any heavy equipment to fight these people off. And meanwhile, a top NATO official said Thursday that at least 1,000 Russian troops have poured into Ukraine with sophisticated equipment and have been in direct contact. Yeah, that's the word the NATO and UN use for war. They've been in contact with Ukrainian soldiers, resulting in casualties. Brigadier General Niko Tak told reporters at NATO headquarters that the ultimate aim of Russia was to stave off defeat from the separatists and turn eastern Ukraine into a frozen conflict that would destabilize the country indefinitely. NATO estimated that another 20,000 Russian troops were right over on the Russian border, waiting to come in. Now, General Tak said the 1,000 Russian troops operating inside Ukraine was a conservative estimate and provided satellite imagery to the media showing an incursion of great sophistication. A leader of pro-Russian rebels in eastern Ukraine reportedly has admitted that thousands of Russians have been fighting alongside his troops. Alexander Zakarzenchenko told Russian television that he estimated that between 3,000 and 4,000 Russians had joined the ranks, and claimed that there were either former Russian service members or current military personnel on leave. And some of the best reporting on the Ukrainian incident is actually coming out of the BBC. They finally pulled their finger out and starting to get back to the news the way it should be after their weird left slant into liberalism for the last year or so. U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Jeffrey posted the following statement in 3 Twitter messages on Thursday. He twittered, "Russian supply tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, and multiple rocket launchers have been insufficient to defeat Ukraine's armed forces. So now an increasing number of Russian troops are intervening directly in fighting on Ukraine territory." And then he wrote, Russia has also sent its newest air defense systems, SA-22s, into eastern Ukraine, now directly involved in the fighting. Ukraine and Western allies have repeatedly accused Russia of providing weapons and training to the rebels, who declared independence from Kiev in 2 eastern districts this past April. We in the West, those that follow the news and have done for a number of years, such as Spiii Radio and VOCR Radio, we who have watched Vladimir Putin's rise from a KGB officer to president know full well he is nothing more than a KGB snake. His methods, tactics, and actions are classic old Soviet tactics. His disregard for what Obama thinks is directly in line with the open mic statement made by Obama to Medved in 2012, which was ignored by mainstream media for the most part. Remember the statement? Would the media dare to remember the statement? Obama, during talks in Seoul, urged Moscow to give him space until after the November ballot, and Medved said he would relay the message to incoming Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, the unusually frank exchange came as Obama and Medved huddled together on the eve of a global nuclear summit in South Korean capital, unaware that their words were being picked up by microphones as reporters entered into the room. Obama has been true to his word. He is allowing Putin to invade the Crimea and slowly move into the Ukraine with little or no action by the United States or anybody else in general terms. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko is calling on the country to resist and asking them not to give in to panic in the wake of Russian forces entering the country. Poroshenko called an urgent session of the National Security Council on Thursday, and security officials as 2 columns of tanks entered the country. I mean, 2 columns of tanks. And the world sits by and does nothing, and President Barack Hussein Obama gets ready to do 2 more events to raise money for the DNC so that in 2016 they will have billions of dollars to spend on a rigged election. Destabilization of the situation and panic is the weaponry of Putin. The old Soviet Guard played this very, very well by destabilizing countries in such a manner. It's nothing new. It might be new to the Obama administration, but it certainly is not new to those who have watched and reported the news on underground media such as Spiii Radio and The Real Story and other places around the net. Now, U.S. officials are holding a series of hurried meetings on Thursday, hurried because Obama's got some fundraising to do in the next couple of days. And he's going up to the Hamptons. He's not slumming it. He's going up to the Hamptons, and he's going all over the big money places to scoop up a couple of $1 million here and there. U.S. officials held these huddles on Thursday in a rush to try and figure something out before Obama leaves town again. An emergency meeting of the National Security Council was convened in the White House Situation Room Thursday afternoon with the aim of determining whether the U.S. and allies should take further military action against ISIS. But State Department spokesman Jen Psaki said the meeting was an opportunity for U.S. leaders to formulate the country's response to what it now describes as a direct Russian military intervention against Ukrainian forces and the problem with ISIS. Now, the emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe were also taking place on Thursday, before separate talks planned on Ukraine at next week's NATO summit in Wales, and the UN General Assembly meeting chaired by no other than Barack Obama in New York in early September. You see, there's no rush. There's no rush in the Obama administration. There's no rush in the Western world. There's no rush. Everybody is battle-weary from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they don't want to stick their foot back into that pool in the Middle East and spend billions of more, if not trillions of more dollars, trying to resolve a problem that the neighbors in the Middle East refuse to pick up a gun or send their children into war. The rapid escalation of Russian attacks in the Ukraine has put the White House under an incredible amount of pressure, and they've been told they'd better respond soon, or look as weak as they truly are showing. In a briefing with reporters, Psaki said the U.S. had a range of tools and sanctions at its disposal to put pressure on Russian leader Vladimir Putin, and hinted that there was a live debate in the administration about speeding up its response. Well, for the love of God, Russia didn't invade Ukraine yesterday. What do you define as speeding up? Mr. President, what strategy do you have on the Ukraine? What strategy do you have on ISIS? What do you have? Where are we? Are we just going to let them go?
We don't have a strategy yet.
We don't have a strategy yet. Okay, thank you, Mr. President. The discussions are ongoing, but what additional steps? The two crises put Obama in a very difficult position of trying to rally international support for simultaneous coalitions and military action in Syria. But it could also require explicit congressional authorization. And you know how much Obama enjoys the administration. Now, on a positive note, I guess, as a Canadian, a positive note, Canadian fighter jets will be patrolling the edge of Russian airspace next week, part of the NATO's response to the unraveling situation. So at least 4 of the 6 CF-18 sent overseas by the Harper Conservative government in Canada earlier this year are now at air bases in Lithuania, and from there they will fly air policing missions over the Baltics. And Canadian jets will be working alongside fighters from Portugal and Germany and Belgium, which will be carrying out flights from bases in other Baltic states. But this isn't to stop Putin. Not at all. The mission is meant to reassure European allies who are a little unnerved by Russian seizure of the Crimean Peninsula. The jets, which had been based in Romania on a training exercise, are now tasked with defending places such as Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian airspace. Excuse me, because those countries are unable to do so on their own. The deployment comes against the unfolding backdrop of heavy fighting and apparent Russian invasion, and brings Canadian fighters as close to Russian territory as they've ever been during this crisis. So, Mr. Obama, with all due respect, if I have any respect left for you, all I can say, sir, is pull your finger out.
Let's be clear about ISIL. They have rampaged across cities and villages, killing innocent, unarmed civilians in cowardly acts of violence. They abduct women and children and subject them to torture and rape and slavery. They have murdered Muslims, both Sunni and Shia, by the thousands. They target Christians and religious minorities, driving them from their homes, murdering them when they can, for no other reason than they practice a different religion. They declare their ambition to commit genocide against an ancient people. So ISIL speaks for no religion. Their victims are overwhelmingly Muslim, and no faith teaches people to massacre innocents. No just God would stand for what they did yesterday and what they do every single day. ISIL has no ideology of any value to human beings. Their ideology is bankrupt. They may claim out of expediency that they are at war with the United States or the West. Fact is, they terrorize their neighbors and offer them nothing but an endless slavery to their empty vision and the collapse of any definition of civilized behavior. And people like this ultimately fail. They fail because the future is won by those who build and not destroy. And the world is shaped by people like Jim Foley and the overwhelming majority of humanity who are appalled by those who killed him.
ISIS or ISIL or whatever they, Islamic State, whatever they're calling themselves this week and whatever they call themselves tomorrow, aren't militants or rebels. They are not extremists. They are, as you pointed out, a 10 to 15,000 strong terrorist army, the largest, best equipped, wealthiest, and most sanguinary terror force on the planet, and it's growing. Their unbridled religious and ethnic cleansing poses an immediate threat to the new government of Prime Minister al-Abadi in Baghdad, the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, and every single Christian, Yazidi, Shiite, and secular Sunni Muslim within their reach. And if they consolidate their control over their so-called caliphate, that genocidal fury is going to be turned against us. You know, Pope Francis was more direct in his comments yesterday than we've heard from our president today. And everyone, I think, certainly in our bureau, has seen the convert or die issues or warnings that were issued to Christians. Maybe the Pope has a better intelligence service than we do, or maybe he just cares more about human beings. Well, the golfer-in-chief is going to have to focus for a little while. One of the only good pieces of news in all of this is that ISIS, or ISIL, or whatever they call themselves, have now captured so much abandoned U.S. and Saddam-era Russian materiel and equipment that they are now recruiting and advertising for mechanics and technicians to maintain the armored vehicles. If we don't do more, like get another carrier battle group out there, we've made a serious mistake.
347-324-3287.
And a couple of sad pieces of news tonight. As we went to air, news breaking that Joan Rivers, who was undergoing a minor surgery procedure on her throat, stopped breathing during the operation, and emergency crews were called. And Jo Rivers is currently under a medical-induced coma, and we wish her well. She's a very caustic lady, but definitely welcome on this planet. And also the body of has been found in an Israeli forest. It has been confirmed that the missing 23-year-old New Jersey man has been found. Sources confirmed that the body of Aaron Sofer of Lakewood, who disappeared last Friday while hiking in Jerusalem Forest with a friend. And sources also said that no signs of violence were found on the body of the yeshiva student. Israel Newsfeed and other local outlets have posted several photos on Twitter of intense police activity in the area. Sofer's parents, Moshe and Shulda, had flown from New Jersey to Israel to assist in the search and had offered a $30,000 reward for information leading to the whereabouts of their son, an Orthodox student who had been studying in Israel for the past year. Now, Israeli police previously said they were probing all possible avenues of the investigation, including a story and the possibility that Sofer may have been kidnapped by Palestinian militants while navigating a steep incline with a friend in the Be'etz Yazid area of the forest. So, sad news. We hope it's not him, but they are basically confirmed that it is. As crazy and as sad as it sounds, we can only hope that he did die of natural causes. Because if he didn't, God help those that may have injured and killed him. And coming out of Chinese state media regarding Canadians, 2 Canadians who've been identified as spies worked in the country as ordinary citizens collecting military and national defense information. Kevin and Julia Dawn Garrett have been detained since early August. The Global Times, the Communist Party mouthpiece, has published an infographic outlining how spies work in China. You have to go to the Global Times and read it. It is so farcical, even a James Bond storyline wouldn't follow these 2 innocent civilians who merely had a coffee shop and were living just north of the border of North Korea and China. Now, of course, everybody's saying that this is a tit for tat because of some problems that Canada and China have been having lately with economic issues. And Canada is slapping down some pretty good tariffs on the Chinese government to break the back of some of the products coming into Canada that the Chinese are selling well below value and trying to destroy certain levels of the Canadian economy. A report breaking out of Calgary, Alberta, our home location, reports that 2 more Canadian boys have joined the ranks of foreign fighters with the Islamic State of Iraq in Syria. Both are relatively recent converts to Islam in Calgary, and in a strange twist, they're also brothers. Their given names in Canada, Gregory and Colin Gordon, converted to Islam and became known to members of the Calgary Muslim community as Abdul Malik and Khalid between 2011 and 2012. Funnily enough, they shared an apartment in the same downtown Calgary high-rise that once housed Damien Claremont and Salman Asharif, who identified as suicide bombers in the ISIS operation in Iraq last November, who took 46 lives during that attack. Claremont was killed fighting in Syria earlier this year. Another Calgarian, Farah Shirdan, who once attended a study group with Claremont and the Gordon brothers, joined ISIS and was reported to have been killed in a battle a few weeks ago. And sources in the Calgary Muslim community have said that the Gordon brothers disappeared in late 2012, around the same time that Ashrafi and Claremont are believed to have traveled to Syria. It's a sad state when these young men have been radicalized and they're taken out of our community, and you find that they're living their Islamic dream, I guess, and by giving their life to a cause that has no real foundation in the Western world. J.P. Morgan, Chase & Co. are investigating a possible cyber attack and working with law enforcement to determine the scope of what's happened. The announcement came after the FBI said Wednesday it's working with the Secret Service on the recently reported cyber attacks against several U.S. financial institutions. Now, earlier this week, Bloomberg.com reported that Russian hackers attacked the U.S. financial system this month, possibly in retaliation against U.S. government-sponsored sanctions aimed at Russia. The attack, according to Bloomberg, led to the loss of sensitive data. And Bloomberg said security experts say the attack appeared far beyond the capabilities of the ordinary criminal hacker. Additionally, the New York Times are citing people familiar with the matter, reported at least 4 other firms in addition to J.P. Morgan were hit this month by coordinated attacks that siphoned off huge amounts of data, including checking and saving account information. J.P. Morgan, of course, is the largest bank in the U.S. if you look at it by way of assets. The FBI said in a statement that the fighting cyber threats and criminal remains a top priority for the U.S. government, and it constantly working with American companies to fight these attacks. And as we move into the final 6 minutes, another piece of Canadian information. I'm sure everybody in North America is familiar with our pal in Toronto, Mr. Rob Ford, the mayor. Well, apparently he's gaining ground on his challengers to retake the seat of the mayor. According to a poll released on Thursday, the boost was coupled with fresh claims of inappropriate behavior. Somebody trying to stick the knife in because he's doing so well, one would think. The city's Catholic School Authority released documents alleging that Ford had threatened a teacher, turned up late and was inebriated to an important practice. Apparently he swore at some of the players and made them roll in animal feces while working as a volunteer head football coach at Don Bosco Catholic Secondary School. Kind of interesting that these stories are seeping out now when Rob Ford is starting to surge in the polls. The allegations have not been proven in court, of course, and Ford has not immediately responded to this information and is refusing to give any kind of email comments to anybody. The documents were released after Freedom of Information requests by the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star newspapers, who subsequently posted it online. Now, Ford was fired from the football coaching job last year, as allegations swirled about his possible use of crack cocaine, and he gained global notoriety after admitting in November that he had smoked crack while in a drunken stupor. Now, Ford has been in a rehabilitation facility in May, and throughout the controversy, he said he would stand for re-election, and he is. The mayor who originally came to power pledging to cut waste at City Hall and keep a lid on taxes has a core base of suburban support. And frankly, he did exactly what he said. He slashed the waste in the Toronto City Council. He slashed the waste that the unions were trying to milk out of the city. And he did keep taxes down. So Rob Ford, although he is not the most likable candidate, when he does a job, he does a job. It's a pity his personal life is such a mess. Now, left-leaning candidate Olivia Chow slipped back to third place on the polls, having 26% after leading earlier throughout the summer. And it looks like Ford is on the comeback trail. But John Tory, who still has the lead, admits that the lead is narrowing. The poll was conducted August the 25th and 26th, and the polls could vary. Things, you know what polls are. Polls are very subjective. So Torontonians will vote for their next mayor on October the 27th, and we'll see if Rob Ford is the man with the plan. And ladies and gentlemen, as we head into the final 3 minutes, as I say every week, and I'm going to say it again, and it may sound redundant, but this is important. To protest an action, to deny what the government or any other company or organization is saying, to protest an action peacefully is democracy. You have the right. You should protest if something is not right. We agree. I agree. I believe you should. But ladies and gentlemen, it should be done peacefully. Because the moment you mix any form of violence into a protest, the moment a protest moves from a protest to a riot, you've lost the plot. You no longer will have the backing of the average citizen. So I implore all of those who plan to protest, those who plan to rage against the machine, and those who wish to make their words known that they will not stand for an action or a law or a rule and try and change the laws and rules, please do it in peace. Because the moment you hit the violence button, you've lost the plot. I can't believe we've blown through an hour already, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an absolute blast. We'll chat soon.
Got a minute? We all have busy lives, and sometimes we forget the small things in life that make many people happy. We work hard, we earn a great deal of money, or we hope to, and we spend a great deal of money. And yet there are those in our world who have no money to spend. There are those in this world that are fighting for survival as we speak. Give a moment to think of those people. Do what you can as a good human being. Do what you can to help their world be a little brighter. Good night, and we'll catch you back here on the next edition of VOCR Radio. This has been a TerraChat Network production.